Well, hello there. That music kind of seemed like it ended a little bit more abruptly than usual today. Nation Sports Talk is up and rolling. He's Jesse Stiers. I'm Shawn Stiers. Hope you're having a great day so far. Did you get to watch the video that I sent you a little bit ago, Jess?
I did. I did watch it.
Shawn Davis's daughter. I'm sure a lot of our listeners slash viewers have heard about this by now. Shawn Davis, our guy, co-host of the Lucky Lefty podcast, and of course does a lot of stuff here with us at Irish Breakdown. His daughter Ari Camille was on The Voice last night, and I was sitting there on my couch watching something else, and all of a sudden I'm in this group text that Vince sends, and he sends a screenshot, and there's Shawn Davis and his wife on TV, and his daughter was singing and the whole thing, and she ended up getting picked by John Legend, or she picked John Legend, I guess. She could pick between Legend and Buble, and she picked John Legend. So very cool. Pretty good singer too.
Yeah, I mean, in order to make it on to the next round or have a choice between judges, you have to be, relatively good. So
Yeah, you have to be relatively good. You have to be
it's,
relatively good just to get on there.
I know. And so, like, anytime I watch The Voice, America's Got Talent, American Idol, I'm like, I couldn't do any of this. So it was funny to read the YouTube comments, though. Actually, it was.
I didn't
like,
read any of the comments. I didn't get into any of that. Were they good? Were they bad? Were they like in between?
very good. I
Okay.
don't see like any, or I wasn't seeing any negative ones, and there was a lot of great feedback. There's over like 90 comments, and there's
Wow.
already let's see, 80,000 views on it, and it's only been up for 19 hours. So it sounds like it's going well. I wish I had that musical talent.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I wish you did. No. Did you see the Super Bowl set a record, a viewership record? 126 million viewers was the average, 2% increase from last year. The peak, according to Fox, was in the second quarter with nearly 136 million, and the halftime show pulled in more than 131 million. Amazing to get those kind of numbers in a blowout.
Yeah, and it's I just always wonder, is this, what's the combination? Is it people that are interested in the game? Are they interested in the halftime? Are they interested in the commercials? And another thing too, if you think about it, those numbers could be more inflated because of all the Super Bowl parties. You're only technically watching on one TV, but I was in a group of probably 15 people or so at a Super Bowl party. And I don't know if we have time, but I would love to digress on that topic. I think that's the last Super Bowl party I will be attending. I hate
You've
it.
come to that conclusion. I don't like doing it either. I don't, because
Everyone was just,
yeah, there's a lot of that. So you probably didn't even get to hear how bad Tom Brady was. So maybe
I didn't even get to hear any of the commercials. The only time it was quiet was during the halftime show, and I was like, "This is what we're choosing to be quiet for."
and
Like,
you get, because a typical, like a good, during the regular season, good viewership for a Super Bowl is like 33, 35 million. That's like really good during the regular season. So when you're looking at pushing 130 million, you're obviously more than triple that number. So you have a lot of people who are basically just there for the party. And you get, yeah,
right.
you're right. You get all the yapping, and it's mostly nonsensical yapping. It's like they're the
Has
casual
nothing to
fans.
related to the game.
That's exactly right. Nothing
Well, I
related to
don't
the game.
mind the yapping, but we would turn up the TV and the people yapping would just continue to talk louder. And it's like, well, we're turning up the TV because we don't want to hear you. There's the bigger issue is the group that we hang out with is so many alpha personalities where they have to feel like they have to be heard. And it's
Uh,
male
are,
and female. And
are you
it's just,
one of them?
no, I'm trying to sit there and just watch the game. Gosh.
Yeah, gave up on group football watching a long time ago. I prefer just to.
I hate to be that crotchety old guy, but like I still want to enjoy. I want to enjoy stuff, and as being a sports fan, I want to actually hear the sports talk and conversation and everything else that's going on.
I got you. I got you. I don't disagree with any of that, and that's yeah. I I'm surprised that again when you're in a group like that, typically it's the commercials that gets people to quiet down a little bit because that's what again like more of the casual people are interested
And
in.
then
They
they
weren't
started
even.
playing this game where they were like trying to guess who the commercial was before. You know how like
Oh boy.
some of these commercials they start off and they don't really tell you what it is, and then like maybe towards the end they're like, "Oh, that's a Rocket Mortgage commercial."
Mhm.
Well, the entire time they're like, "Oh, it's got to be this. It's got to be that." And it's like, "Why don't we just watch the commercial? It'll
My
tell us."
my favorite was still the Duncan commercial with the Afflecks and Belichick. You probably
So,
didn't.
you know what's funny? That commercial comes on and it's Dunkin' colors everywhere, and I'm pretty
Uh-huh.
sure it says DN everywhere or DD everywhere for Dunkin' Donuts, right?
Right.
And this girl literally
Oh, no.
would not stop going, "Is this Dunkin' Donuts? Is this Dunkin' Donuts?" She literally screamed it like 6 times, and it's like,
Oh
"You've
man.
never gone to Dunkin' Donuts." Like, it's their colors, and it says DD everywhere. Like, I don't know how many more contextual clues you need.
Oh, sounds like you just had a great night.
We
Great
left
Super
at
Bowl.
halftime.
Great Super Bowl viewing. Yeah. Was it the fiance's friends? Is that kind of, where
No,
the
it was my friends. They just invited too many people, and they invited the side of the friend group that I just
the
have no
wrong
taste for.
right, the wrong side of the family showed up, huh?
Man,
All right, well, let's talk some Notre Dame football. How about that? We are kind of in this cycle right now where obviously there's at least a good amount going on in terms of coaching hires and assistants. We talked yesterday about Jawan Sider and in line to become Notre Dame's next running backs coach, the Penn State running backs coach. So I thought, top 5 Tuesday. Let's bring it back once again. It's a top 5 Tuesday. So we're not going to include Sider because he hasn't officially been announced as coach yet. We're going to rank our top 5 assistant coaching hires that Marcus
so who's
Freeman
off the list again?
has
Sorry.
made. So Sider is not the Penn State guy.
Oh, you dirty dog.
You can't include him. You can't include him. These are hires that Marcus Freeman has made during his 3 years as head coach. I mean, I guess if you really want to include him, you can. I think that there are other options I would put above him. I think it's too early to put him in, even if he were officially announced, just because we haven't actually seen him coach here at Notre Dame yet, right? Like we know what his track record is at Penn State, but doesn't he have to do something here before you could include him anyway?
Yeah, the optimist in me.
the eternal optimist in Jesse.
So
So
I
who's
was talking about this. Sorry, right before we get into this, I know I
okay?
keep doing this to you, and I'm sorry, but I was talking in office today, and a lot of people were giving me crap. They were like, "Oh, you just love to wear your Notre Dame stuff, don't you?" And I'm like, "Well," because I had on my Notre Dame sweatshirt, and I usually wear some sort of matching Notre Dame hat, and it's cold as hell out, so I had my Notre Dame scarf on that I got from the playoff game, and so this guy goes, "You just like Notre Dame, don't you?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, like I'm not just in it for football like you Ohio State fans. All you care about is football. I care about Notre Dame as a program, the longevity, the brand. Like we're good. Notre Dame is good outside of just football, and there's other sports basically." And I was like, "That's all you Ohio State people care about because the Browns have sucked forever. The Steelers aren't a part of your state, and the Bengals aren't any good. So everyone in this state, all you care about is Ohio State football and nothing else. You couldn't give a crap about anything else Ohio State, but since they're good at football, that's all you care about." And so we were going back and forth, and finally he was like, "You're just an optimist about everything." And I was like, "Well, I mean, I'm not going to go into a game thinking my team is going to lose. I don't know if that's like the ex-player mentality I had. Like, you never
Right.
go into a game and be like, I'm going to lose." And he's like, "Well, didn't you think Ohio State would win?" I was like, "I thought on paper Ohio State had a better team, but there's stuff Notre Dame could have done to win that game, like if they executed how they were supposed to." And I was like, just because you might be the underdog doesn't mean you're just going to go out there and get like blown
Yeah, I
out,
mean, and spoken like an Ohio State fan.
That's what I
Let's
mean. All it
be
circled
honest.
back to was it just must be nice being an Ohio State
Yeah,
football fan because that's all they care about. And
exactly.
they're good every year. So it's just like I don't know. That's the end of my second tirade here. But I was just like, I don't know what you want me to say. I love Notre Dame, and I love them outside of football season, win or lose.
I'm just impressed that it's Tuesday and you can show up at work in the office with a sweatshirt and a hat on. Like, that sounds like a pretty nice work environment.
Yeah, we have a very casual clothing work
Sounds
environment.
Sounds like it. So we're going to get into our list. Andrew put his up. This is interesting, and he actually he made a correction. So he's got Al Golden, D'Lo McCullough, Al Washington, Mike Denbrock, and then he put Joe Rudolph on at the end. So I think that's a solid list.
It's a good start.
I've got 3 of those on my list.
Same.
Can we come to the conclusion that Al Golden is the number 1 hire? Is he at the top of your list?
There's absolutely no doubt what he changed the program over defensively wise. And you have to, I think the number one thing that you have to realize is without Al Golden, this isn't a national championship team. Their defense made up for some of the deficiencies that they had.
Caliber team. They didn't
win
a national championship.
They made up for some of the deficiencies the offense had, not only this past season, but seasons prior as well. So,
and it allowed the offense to operate the way it did with a quarterback who wasn't going to push it down.
They wanted to control tempo, run the ball, and be more of kind of a clock management type offense.
Right. I went through and looked at some of the national, the final stat rankings end of the season. Here's where Al Golden's defense ranked. This is just insane. 3rd down defense, number 12. 4th down defense, number 9. Pass efficiency defense and defensive touchdowns, both number 1. Fumbles recovered, number 2. Passes intercepted, number 5. Pass yards allowed, number 4. Scoring defense, pass yards, I already got pass yards allowed, both number 4 there. Total defense, number 11. Sacks, number 37. Red zone defense, number 18. Just flat out dominant across the board. And, obviously he's going to be sorely missed. But as you said, turn the defense into an elite defense, a national championship caliber defense. And that's where the standard is now. So it's a big bar for Chris Ash coming in the door. Like, did you consider Chris Ash at, since like you were talking about Jawan Sider, did you consider Chris Ash at all for this top 5?
Been out of the college game too long, doesn't have a ton of college defensive experience. I mean, basically he was a co-defensive coordinator for 1 season at Ohio State and then was the lead defensive coordinator at Texas during their COVID season. I just need more than that. And he doesn't have a track record of good recruiting, good player development in the college level. So he's not there he has a lot to prove, honestly, in my opinion.
Andrew says he can't believe Golden didn't get more interest as a Power 4 head coach.
I don't think he wants to be in college.
That's the thing. I just think the fact that he made this move going back to the Cincinnati Bengals, I think that, he needed an opportunity to show he could be a defensive coordinator. He wasn't getting that opportunity in the NFL. So he comes to a place like Notre Dame and,
look, portfolio.
I think that because he's in his mid 50s, so he's still relatively young as well. I think if anything, maybe Al Golden, like he definitely wanted to be back in the NFL. And I think that maybe his goal is being an NFL head coach and not a college head football coach anymore. And I think that's maybe why, like he wasn't concerned about head coaching opportunities in college. It was more about getting back to the NFL and showing that he can succeed there and have an opportunity. Like if he can, it's going to be a tough task because they've got a lot of holes they've got to fill on that defense. But that's obviously why you hire a guy like Golden, because you think that he can, bring some things back together. And if they can, if they can be a playoff team and even get back to the AFC Championship game within the next couple of years, I think that Al Golden potentially becomes a pretty big commodity in those circles.
Yeah, so I think Al Golden was never going to take another college defensive coordinator position. I don't think he was ever going to take a college head coaching position again. He did that with Temple. He did that with Miami. I just think that's when you're talking about being a college head coach, there's just so much that goes into it. You're constantly recruiting. You're constantly, it's just the day-to-day wear is different. And so I thought the only thing that was going to pull him away from Notre Dame would be to be obviously an NFL defensive coordinator. And like you said, it helps that he was on that staff as the linebackers coach before coming to Notre Dame. So obviously Zach Taylor has some familiarity with Al Golden and feels comfortable that he can now be the defensive coordinator. I mean, honestly, if you look at it, if Al Golden can add 2 wins because of improved defense or 3 wins to this Bengals team, they're a playoff team, because that's what they missed the playoffs by this last season, was really, 2 or 3 games. And so with how awful their defense was and how great their offense was, you imagine that Al Golden can fix up a game or 2 and get them right back into playoff contention at worst.
DK's getting spicy. Do you buy or sell this? Golden will replace James Franklin.
That's a 100% sell. I don't think he'll ever be a college head coach again.
I don't either. And not because he's going to be turned down, because I just think that, look, because again, like Marcus Freeman's still in his 30s. Al Golden is not quite 20 years older, but he's 16, 17-ish years older. The guy's in his 50s, and I think that there's just a different level of energy that you have to put into everything now in the college game. And I think at that age, like, worry about coaching football and only coaching football and not all the other stuff. And I like we were saying, I think he wants to be an NFL head coach. I don't think college is his goal at this point. He's done that. So who's your number 2 Marcus Freeman hire?
So I hate to go, DC and OC, but Mike Denbrock has to be not my number 2.
That's right where I went as well.
When you're talking about, basically what did Notre Dame do since Marcus Freeman got hired? The first thing they did was, they changed recruiting. They changed, and to me, the next big thing that they changed, it started with Marcus Freeman and it continued with Al Golden, is they solidified a national championship level defense. And if you have a national championship level defense, what do you have to do next? You have to counter that with a national championship level offense. And, Jared Parker wasn't cutting it. I don't think Tommy Rees was patient enough to cut it. I think he obviously wanted to fast track to the NFL. And so naturally, you have to get a guy who's going to be able to not only recruit at the highest level, but scheme at the highest level as well. And when you're coming off, Mike Denbrock winning a Heisman at LSU, poaching him from an SEC team after the offensive output that they had, I think that was huge for Marcus Freeman. And so I have to go Mike Denbrock because of just how good the offense and that's the thing, is this is just year 1 with a quarterback that was probably not as good as throwing as Denbrock would hoped. Right. I think you're really going to start to see, the fruits of Mike Denbrock's labor in year 2, 3, and 4, when we start to see more of the quarterback development, a guy that's in-house consistently, a guy that's running probably a more traditional Mike Denbrock offense, aka more or less what you saw at LSU. So in order to keep up with the precedent that the defense set, or the standard, I think it was important to get someone equally as qualified on the offensive side. And Mike Denbrock is considered one of the top offensive coordinators in the country.
Absolutely. Coached a Heisman Trophy winner, coached the highest scoring offense in the nation, the year before coming here to Notre Dame. And they had number 10 scoring offense, averaged over 36 points a game here at Notre Dame this season. So, they put a lot of points on the board, in spite of the fact that they weren't a great passing team. They were a good enough passing team, but they ran the heck, obviously, out of the football. So, Andrew says, is Denbrock number 2 because of reputation? I mean, that is...
But I mean, that goes into hiring someone, though.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like, let's remember Al Golden in year 1. There were many more people who were out on Al Golden after his first season than are out on Mike Denbrock right now, right? I get what Andrew's saying. Like, there's definitely still plenty of room for Mike Denbrock to continue to grow this offense, but there were a lot of people out on Al Golden after year 1. And again, look where he left this defense by the time he left. Yeah. So some of that might be based on reputation, but the guy has been around the block. And again, when you look at what he did at LSU, and still had a really good first season at Notre Dame, but there were some constraints on what he could do because of the fact that you had, the quarterback that he had. And that's not a knock on Riley Leonard. It's not a knock on Denbrock. They had to play as much to Riley Leonard's strengths as possible to get the most that they could out of the offense. And to me, that's ultimately a good thing. The fact that you are willing to play to the strengths of the guys that you have, rather than try to fit square pegs in round holes. Yeah, exactly.
And I get what Andrew is saying in terms of our offense wasn't electric, but to me it was. It's just everyone wants to be the sexy, air the ball down the field, have over 300 passing yards a game. But like, if you look at some of the stuff that Deland McCullough would kind of talk about in his post-game tweets or whatever, and his kind of final tweets, I guess, before he went to the Raiders, their running back room led the country in like the most explosive plays on the ground. So just because you're not doing it through the air doesn't mean you aren't electric, right? Like they still were an electric running team.
Andrew says it's more because of the second half play calling against NIU that he says that. Otherwise,
yeah, and that I feel like that game was such a weird situation of, I think the offense or the head coach and the offensive coordinator wanted Riley Leonard to maybe get caught up or progress on some things that they felt like he was lacking in, and it wasn't the right time or place. So I understand where you're coming from, and I think that was kind of the light bulb moment for Denbrock, and he even said so after the game is, I need to do a better job of throwing out the plays that aren't working for Riley Leonard and focus on the things that are working, and that's really when we saw the offense kind of hit its full stride, in my opinion.
Sure, absolutely. Couple follow-up points on the NFL and Al Golden. Good point from Tyler. There's an off season for coaches in the NFL. I mean, it is obviously year-round because of recruiting and everything that comes with it in college. So that's a big difference. You do at least get a little bit of a break in the NFL, to step away a little bit. DK's getting salty, if you will. He's coming at you for your 100% sell on Al Golden ever going to Penn State. He says, and I'm sure you thought Belichick would coach at North Carolina. Obviously, different situation because Belichick's hand was pretty much forced on that because of zero options to
supply
continue
and
to
demand
coach in the NFL. Yeah.
So I'll give you this, DK. I literally never thought Bill Belichick would coach in college again. So
I didn't either.
There is room for error, but I'll give you one of my dogs if Al Golden ends up coaching in college again.
Dead or alive?
Yeah. You pick.
Yeah. All right. So the two coordinators are at the top, Al Golden, Mike Denbrock. Who do you put number 3 on?
This is where it starts to get a little bit hairy. I have to, and 3 and 4, I think, is probably interchangeable depending on who you ask, but I have to go Mike Mickens at number 3.
No, Mike Mickens is not eligible because Freeman didn't hire him. I think that was on the sheet at the top. Well, Mike Mickens is not eligible since he was hired by Brian Kelly.
Okay. Well, that just moves up the next guy, and Deland McCullough is number 3 for me.
Okay.
I will save the Mickens stuff because I do see the asterisk below and where you would rank him. So I'll save my explanation for when we get there. But Deland McCullough, the reason why I had him not 3 initially is because I felt like the running back room, while it wasn't what it is now, it wasn't as bad as what the secondary, the shape the secondary was in. I thought Mickens did more, but what Deland McCullough did to get everything out of this the running back room, to recruit this running back room, and really transform, kind of the offense into this kind of pound and ground type of team was really impressive to me. So, I mean, we're talking about, Jeremiah Love, who was one of the most explosive running backs in all of college football, and now is going to be a Heisman candidate going into next season. I can't remember preseason the last time you said Notre Dame had a Heisman candidate. I know Josh Adams was by the time his season ended.
Yeah.
But going into a season, I can't remember the last time you said that a Notre Dame running back was going to be on a very short list for Heisman. So again, the running back room that McCullough took over, it wasn't in horrible shape, but he took it to that next tier, basically, right? Like he took it from good to elite, in my opinion, and that's the difference maker.
Yeah, I mean, it's packed with talent. You've got two guys who are definitely going to play in the NFL, and other guys are going to have a really good chance to play in the NFL. Once we get a chance to see a little bit more of them, I think they're going to have great chances. And Audric Estime is already in the NFL, obviously. So, yeah, I mean, the job that he's done, both recruiting and coaching, getting these guys to buy into different roles and stuff like that. And I have seen already people start to ask, like, well, with Sider coming in, is there going to be a different philosophy? Like, are they going to let Jeremiah Love have more carries, than D'Lo McCullough let him have? That goes back. And I think that people who have listened to the show before could be, because we've talked about it, and I know Brian has talked about it, like, the reason that Jeremiah Love's carries are what they are, I mean, that was something that they talked to Jeremiah and his mother about when they were recruiting him. And I think it's a great, as great as he is and as explosive as he is, let's not forget Jadarian Price is explosive as well, but them splitting those carries like that is better for both of their futures. It's better for their present as well as their future, because the fewer hits you can take, the fewer carries that you can take in college and still be effective, that gives you a better chance to have a longer career when it comes to the NFL. You don't want to be taking all that pounding when you're still in college. And that was something that was discussed in the recruiting process. They didn't just want him, they didn't want them throwing Jeremiah Love on the field and having him take 20, 25, 30 carries per game. That was not part of the deal when they recruited him. So I think it's really effective. And again, I think it kept both of their legs fresh deeper into the season. And when you look at how deep the season ended up going, I just think it was nothing but good for both of them. And NFL scouts know, like, they don't have to see more carries per game to know what Jeremiah Love can do for you, to know how good he is, or Jadarian Price for that matter either. All they've got to do is look at the film and see the human highlight reel that he is. So, but I agree. The D'Lo McCullough, so far we're lockstep. 1, 2, 3, all the same. I'm curious. I think we're going to get a little bit of difference here at 4 and 5. Who do you have at number 4?
Number 4 for me was Brian Mason. And the reason why I say Brian Mason is because you have to look at, in my opinion, special teams is really like a third of the game, maybe a little bit less, maybe a quarter of the game. I don't think it gets quite the same as offense and defense, but you have to look at where special teams was under Brian Kelly. This very conservative, we're not going to take any chances type situation. And then you have Brian Mason, who came in, and now we're creating turnovers, we're blocking punts. And then not only that, but then the aftermath, or the Brian Mason effect is what I'll call it, is I don't know if Marcus Freeman starts dabbling in all these fake punts and then setting the standard for the next special teams coach. Had Brian Mason not done such a great job initially, I think he opened up everyone's eyes, especially Marcus Freeman's, to what you can accomplish or how you can change the game on the special teams aspect. And so to go from a regime that just basically cared nothing about special teams as long as it didn't produce a negative play, to a guy who now wants to change or use special teams to change games, to have an impact on games, to get extra possessions, to hold the ball longer, whatever it might be. I think that's an important aspect of the game. And so for that reason, Brian Mason, even though he's not here anymore and his time was short, I think he really changed and shaped the philosophy of how Notre Dame goes about special teams.
That's a good call. And I cheated. I put Mason and Marty Biaggi together as my number 5.
Okay.
Because I think that one was just as important as the other, in considering they both coach special teams. And I agree with everything that you said. And we've talked about this a lot before. The fact that but Brian Kelly just didn't want his special teams to be a liability. Like, he just wanted it to be a break even prospect. And he never put an abundance of time, resources, thought into special teams. It was essentially an afterthought. But under Brian Mason, it obviously became a weapon, especially with all the blocks. But there were a lot of other little things as well, field position and all those kind of things. And I think year one under Marty Biagi, they were solid, if maybe not, it might have felt like they took a little step back, but obviously it was this year where they really started to blossom again, especially when you saw all the fakes. But I think what got lost in the fakes is Marty Biagi's special teams this year led the nation in block kicks. They were number 2 in block punts. They were number 7 in kickoff return defense. They were number 23 in kickoff returns, 37 in net punting. I think that is obviously still an area where they can get better. And, Vince, always talks about the rugby style kicks and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, let this guy kick, let this guy punt. He's got a big leg. Just let him punt. Don't make him have to think about, rugby and all this different stuff. Punt return defense, they were number 15 as well. So I feel like the point you made, Mason elevated the game, but Marty Biagi, like he set that standard. And the standard, Marty Biagi took over and he has kept it and maybe even elevated because of all the, the different fakes and things like that. But I do think you're right about, how Mason probably impacted Marcus Freeman's thoughts on what you could do with special teams, making it an actual weapon.
And I think another big difference that you have to accredit the special teams play to is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just don't remember a time where you see so many, starters or borderline, maybe 2 deep guys on all of the special teams. It felt like for Brian Kelly, it was kind of this charity case of, all right, well, we'll just put out the guys who are maybe 3rd or 4th deep. And as long as you don't make a mistake, you're getting playing time. I'm happy. You're happy. Nothing can go wrong type situation. But I enjoy that Marcus Freeman puts a lot of the young guns and even starters out there. I'm pretty sure I've seen Drake Bowen out there before on kickoff team and stuff. So I appreciate that. I don't think special teams is just a time to kick up your feet and relax. Essentially, you still gotta have playmakers out there on special teams.
Yep. All right. So who's your number 5 higher then?
So because Mike Mickens is not eligible and because I can't read, this last spot is kind of up for debate. And I guess you can tell me if this person qualifies or not, if they're considered a coach or not. But can I put Chad Bowden on this list, or is he considered not really a coach?
He's not really considered a coach, but I mean, you can, for this purpose, I think you can put him on there because he's obviously had a big impact on the program.
So number 5 would be, if it's not Miggins, it'd be Chad Bowden, or it would be Rudolph, for Joe Rudolph, to be honest with you. And I think I want to go Joe Rudolph because, and there's nothing against Chad Bowden, but I still personally believe Chad Bowden is pretty replaceable to a degree. And I think it shows that Notre Dame, because Notre Dame, I know Notre Dame has gone after a couple guys here and it just hasn't really worked out yet, but I think it also is maybe an indictment of that position that Notre Dame hasn't completely hired someone yet. They don't feel the burning sensation to get that over and done with like they did with, defensive coordinator and replacing Dylan McCullough so fast. So I think whoever replaces Chad Bowden, as long as they are lockstep with Marcus Freeman, because Marcus Freeman still has a big role in recruiting and kind of giving the overall picture of the player that he's looking for on both sides of the ball. So yes, Chad Bowden was important, but I still think that as long as you can get a guy who is a really good recruiter and has the connections, I think that position will take care of itself. But the reason I have to go with Joe Rudolph is because I thought the offensive line, to be honest with you, would fall off after Harry Heastan. And Joe Rudolph, and maybe this is bad sources on my end, but I had people kind of telling me that, Joe, because he came from Wisconsin, that Joe Rudolph, and then he went to Virginia Tech, I believe. Joe Rudolph, could be hit or miss. It's kind of like a 50-50. I don't think 100% we knew if it would pan out. And I was in fear that kind of, the offensive line at Notre Dame would be in jeopardy, right? Because of the long-standing track record that Notre Dame has of not only getting guys drafted, but all pros, guys who are going to end up in the Hall of Fame. I thought that would kind of take a nosedive after Harry Heastan. And it was maybe rocky a little bit for Joe Rudolph to start. But, I mean, we talked about Al Golden. We've talked about other people who've had maybe a little bit of a rocky start. But I think after what I saw this last season of not only trusting that you're going to go with the young talent over more of these, veteran guys, but then kind of having to make this, constant in and out weaving lineup across the offensive line because of injuries that happen regular season, happen in the playoffs. Joe Rudolph just consistently found answers and put a line together that was best suited for what Notre Dame needed in that particular moment. And so I have to give a lot of kudos because he's still recruiting at a high level. He's playing all of his young recruits early and getting them developed. But then the ability to adapt when things aren't going your way and still have success is highly impressive to me.
Okay, so a lot there. I'll save because I've still got one more coach that I'm good, and I don't have Rudolph on my top 5. I've got one other guy who is at number 4, and we talked about the special teams guys, and those were my number 5. My next question was going to be, of the coaches who didn't show up in the top 5, which are we going to find out most about this season? And mine is Rudolph, because he's right in that picture, and I agree, like, especially when you take into account all the injuries that they had to deal with on the offensive line and the way that they were able to plug guys in and make it work and get to a national championship game and, start a guy who had started one career game at left tackle in the national championship game after Knapp got hurt, obviously, in the summer. There was, I think that Joe Rudolph, I would hope anyway, because I think that for some people, the jury is still out on him, but I think that we're going to find out much more about Rudolph next year because he's got all these guys coming back now. There's going to be so much experience. There is zero excuse for not having an absolutely dominating offensive line next season. So I think that we're going to find out exactly, what Joe Rudolph is as an offensive line coach. I think he's been a pretty good coach. And as you said, he continues to recruit at a really high level, but I think without a shadow of a doubt, we're going to find out just how good he is as a line coach based on what that line does this season, because there's just so much coming back, barring injuries. There's no excuse not to have a flat out dominating line.
So I'll let you do your number 4, and then I'll answer basically what you did of the coaches who didn't show up in your top 5.
So my number 4 is Max Bulla, and I'm surprised, being the former linebacker, that you didn't have Big Max, Mad Max in your.
He was right after Joe Rudolph.
Okay, so we basically kind of flip flopped him. Then Rudolph was next for me. Max Bulla is next for you, and I mean, they had so little experience at the linebacker position coming into this season outside of Jack Kaiser, and even Kaiser with his experience, he was still a part-time player. The year before last as well, when J.D. Bertrand and Maris Leofau were around. And as Beefeater says, good to see Maris Leofau at the Pink game the other night. He shows up at those games for a reason. Sonia Citron. So, but, there was so little experience that Bulla had in that linebacking room. And to be a first-year full-time position coach, even though he was entrusted to be a full-time position coach, as a grad assistant the year before. Like, Bowen ended up leading the team in tackles. Jaden Osbury, Bowen, Sneed, and Kaiser were all among the team's top 6 tacklers this season. And Jalen Sneed had the most productive season that he's ever had, even though, maybe he wasn't always completely happy with the role that he had, and they were all part-time guys because of that 5-man rotation. I think that 5-man rotation worked out great. Kingston Viliamu Asa got a ton of playing time, and he was, still significant as well, until he got injured. That obviously limited him toward the end of the season. So you got Andrew says, why doesn't Bulla get dinged a bit for the playoffs? He thought the linebackers fell off a bit in the semis and the final. I mean, I'm not going to judge a whole body of work based on 2 games. I mean, they did still win the semifinal to get to the championship. And I think that what happened in the championship game was still ultimately about the game plan. Yeah. The scheme that that they did, that Al Golden decided that they needed to go with in that game. More so than what the actual on the linebackers kind of thing.
I think the title game was largely scheme. As a position coach, when your defensive coordinator says, "Hey, this is what we're doing. I need you to, come up with drills and drill these guys because of what I want to do." It's not really in your control. And I think the biggest contrast that we saw in the semi against Penn State was I thought they played great in the second half. It was the first half. And again, I don't know if it was, maybe a combination of being tired, but I really think that Penn State went against schedule a lot in that first half and did a lot of stuff misdirection wise.
Right.
I don't think Notre Dame was ultimately prepared.
The adjustments in the second half, they were there. Yeah. They did so much that was off script, compared to, what they usually do with that game plan in the first half. Joe says he thinks a big reason was because of the injuries at the defensive line. And I think there was some impact, obviously, there as well.
Those guys
when you're missing Riley Mills. Yeah.
Eat double teams. They consume offensive linemen, so they can't work up to the second level. I mean, as a linebacker, your favorite thing is a stud defensive lineman in front of you. And I had that in high school for a long time. Shout out to Kali Boyd. I mean, the guy was a massive guy. And when I was young, that's the guy they were worried about. So I got to move around pretty freely until my name kind of got more, resonated within the conference. But I was fortunate enough to play behind him, and that's where a lot of the tension was. So it allowed me to kind of be more free moving, essentially.
So Andrew brings up Al Washington, and I do agree. I think he deserves credit as well, getting the kind of production that he was out of third string guys. But I can't include Washington in the top 5 because he needs to recruit better. I think we all know that. That's kind of what it comes down to now for him. I think the on-field coaching has been really good, especially this year. I think that this was his best year as an assistant coach so far, but the recruiting aspect still needs to catch up to it as well.
So of the coaches that didn't show up in the top 5, which will we find out the most about this season? That's Al Washington for me, in my opinion. And I went back and forth between him and Mike Brown. I think it's a little too early for Mike Brown. And I've beat that horse to death talking about how Notre Dame needs to have a stud wide receiver in this room next season. But Al Washington is the guy that we're going to find out the most about this season because of what you said, recruiting. And 2, I mean, he's losing basically 2 All-Americans or 2 draft picks at defensive tackle, right? So
who had been there for almost 12 years combined.
Right. And so now that's a big thing to me because you need to replace that and you need to show that you can develop at that position now that those guys are going. And then also, I think the Viper and the traditional defensive end position is going to see a lot of change this season as well. You're going to have a lot of younger guys stepping up. Some guys coming back from injury. And so I think across the whole defensive line, there's going to be a lot of change and a big youth movement compared to usual. And I know they got the guy from USC, they got the guy from Louisville as defensive transfers along the defensive line. So that's going to help. But I just need to see there's going to be a lot of turnover and you need to be probably 2 or 3 deep at the defensive line to have a really strong unit. And so I think this is a big prove-it year for Al Washington in terms of coaching and replacing a lot of guys who are departing.
I concur with all of that. I think it was a really good coaching year, but there are things that he's got to keep showing up on going forward. And I think that, as this room has become more his, I think that we've seen more of him and more of his ability to coach these guys. But there's some guys now they gotta get something out of this year. Are we going to save the rest for rapid fire? Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do this.
So fill in the blank. It's blank that the Texas rivals site Orange Bloods is reporting that Fighting Irish secondary coach Mike Mickens is one of the top 3 candidates to fill the Longhorns' vacant safeties coaching position.
It's delusional. It's very daydreamy. And I'm trying not to be biased with that answer, but again, Mike Mickens is Marcus Freeman's boy, right? And they have a very strong connection together. I don't see Mike Mickens taking a lateral position to go down at Texas, right? Like, and I know maybe they can offer him a little bit more money, but I think that his relationship with Marcus Freeman is highly beneficial. And I think to a degree, Marcus Freeman is kind of tutoring him to a degree, taking him under his wing. And, I know that Mike Mickens probably wants bigger opportunities and more on his plate now. But I think that Marcus Freeman is building him up to that.
Yeah, I mean, if this position
restarting, if you go to Texas, basically.
Exactly. You're the safeties coach. Right now, he's running the entire secondary. Right. It's the entire
almost
secondary.
A downgrade.
Yeah, that's right. Like, it sounds like the biggest upside would just be a bigger wad of cash money, potentially. And I would think that Notre Dame's going to do everything that they can, to at least match if not. I mean, but and this comes with success, obviously, and it also comes with, with a guy who's been around and is not yet a coordinator, So I think that there's going to be different teams at different levels that are going to try to lure a guy like Mike Mickens away. And the other candidates are reportedly Pittsburgh assistant head coach Corey Sanders, as well as Rutgers cornerbacks coach Mark Orphy. Those are the top three guys in terms of the top candidates there at Texas. I do think that it's fairly delusional, but again, you hope that relationship is strong, but we also know that Marcus Freeman had a pretty good relationship with Chad Bowden, and Chad Bowden ultimately decided that Notre Dame was not his thing, and he was some big USC fan growing up, and that meant more. So I guess ultimately it comes down to what means more to Mike Mickens, and you hope that continues to mean what he's built here so far in that secondary at Notre Dame, because I think that we can all see and appreciate what he's brought. And as we said in the first segment, Mike Mickens was not eligible to be in the top 5 list of Marcus Freeman hires, because even though Marcus Freeman retained him, Mike Mickens was here before Marcus Freeman even got here as an assistant coach when he came over from Cincinnati. So if Mickens would have been eligible to be in the top 5 of Marcus Freeman hires, where would you have put him in that
number
top
3?
5? You put him number 3 behind the two coordinators?
Behind the two coordinators, because, and I'd have him ahead of Deland McCullough because of, where that secondary room was compared to where it is now is like night and day difference. And again,
yes,
the running back room changed before and after Deland McCullough. Yes, it got better, but it's not night and day difference like it is with the secondary. We're talking about, Cam Hart got drafted. Tyreek Bracey got drafted. There's other guys. I can't name them all off the top of my head. I know other guys got drafted. Then you've got All-Americans out there. You got Benjamin Morrison, who's going to go in the first round. You got Xavier Watts, who's probably going to go in the second round. Then we start talking about, okay, the recruiting and continuing this lineage of good corners. Now you got Leonard Moore on the docket. You got, Christian Gray. I know, even though he struggled a little bit, is a very good player. You got Adon Schuler at safety, who's going to be a tremendous player for the rest of his time at Notre Dame. It's not just one position like it is running back. The secondary is corners, safeties, and the way he elevated and kind of took it from the dirt to making it now a premier group or position group at Notre Dame, where guys are All-Americans and safety and getting drafted and being first and second round picks. It's just a complete difference my opinion.
Let's not forget that Leonard Moore was not a 5-star guy. He was fairly highly thought of. There were plenty of people in the recruiting world who doubted how fast Leonard Moore was. We saw the speed that Leonard Moore has, obviously. Remember when he ran down what's his name? The Ohio State running back, on that 70-yard run, that set up that touchdown. I'm drawing a blank on his name, but
Travion Henderson.
Was it
or Judkins? It was Judkins.
Shawn Judkins. Yes, thank you very much. But yeah, so that's the thing about Mickens is, even though and you can say the same thing obviously about Sauce Gardner when he was at Cincinnati. He has an eye for guys who he knows can do it, even though they might not have that as high a recruiting profile as some of these others. And look at what he's done with them once they've gotten here. He's elevated. And honestly, I think Christian Gray is going to end up being at least a top, like he'll be drafted within the top 3 rounds by the time it's all said and done. I think that he's going to end up being, one of the guys that we're going to look back and he's going to be in that list, even though, yeah, he was picked on a time or two. It's really just a matter of refining a few things, and I think he's going to be fine by the time all is said and done. But Mickens to Texas, I would, like, if I went scale of 1 to 10, how much do I think it'll happen? That's exactly would be my number, a 2. I think the chances would be pretty low that it's actually going to happen. Fill in the blank. The Notre Dame position group you have the most concern about heading into spring practice is blank.
Of the position groups that I have the least amount of confidence in.
No, the most concern about, not least confidence. You have the most concern about. I guess it's a matter of wording, but.
Can I give you a position on each side, or do you want me to pick one?
Sure.
Defensive line on
defense. You always like to go multiple options if you can.
It's hard. It's hard. I'd go defensive line on defense and wide receiver on offense.
I'd go defensive line on defense and tight ends on offense. I think there's more questions right now about the tight end group than there has been in a long time. Losing Mitchell Evans, and you've got a couple injuries and that kind of thing.
I need my man from Arkansas to have a big year.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it's not like he was a high production guy at Arkansas. He was pretty good, but they are bringing him in, and it's like you haven't seen a transfer tight end in a long time. The defensive line, just because there's so much turnover, and because look at the difference in what that defensive line was with Howard Cross and without Howard Cross last year. And then you obviously have some injuries, at the end position, that impacted that as well. And then look at how things turned out without Riley Mills at the end. And again, I think that Gabe Rubio did a good job against Penn State and against Georgia, but the pass rush wasn't as needed in those games.
Yeah, he's a first and second down type of defensive tackle. He's not going to be on the field in second and third and long.
Exactly. Stymie and John both say that their concern is about.
I was hoping you would bring this up, because I don't know how you could have any concerns about offensive line, about considering what they went through last year and still had a lot of success.
You got to the championship game with.
If you can get through last year, I think you could get through any year. In my opinion,
anything. Yeah, exactly. That's a like I said, I'm really confident in the offensive line. That is actually, I think Vince and I were talking about it, the confidence side of things, running backs and the offensive line. Those are the two things that I'm most confident in, probably on the entire team right now. Because there's still just enough questions. Andrew says safety. I think they'll end up being okay at safety. Again, they brought in another transfer there, and I think Adon Schuler is going to be really good. I know Schuler had a few too many missed tackles. That's going to be the biggest thing for him. It's just cleaning up the missed tackles.
I thought towards the end of the season he was great in terms of tackling.
Yeah, I mean, there was in the playoffs, it was funny because it kind of went they went in bunches for him in terms of misses. He would go a few games, not miss any, and then all of a sudden he'd have 3 or 4 in one game. But I think all in all, he had a really good year, and I think he's going to do nothing but get even better next year, and step up and fill that void. So
Stymie actually brings up a good point of, the 25-26 starting quarterback isn't going to be as mobile as Riley Leonard. And I do agree that probably masked and covered up some of the deficiencies amongst the offensive line.
Right.
Because, if Angeli was quarterback, look at how that Penn State drive started to trend towards the end. He was taking sacks, right? I think sometimes fail to remember that Riley Leonard's ability to get out of the pocket largely helped this offensive line to a degree. But when you're talking about CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie, I don't think that they are. Obviously, they're not as mobile as Riley Leonard, but they're no stick in the mud. You know what I mean? They're going to be able to move to a degree and hopefully escape the pocket. But I do agree the offensive line will have to be better this season because of Riley Leonard's departure in terms of sustaining their blocks longer.
That is a fair
and
point.
Not
Very
like
fair point.
the pocket collapse. So
yeah,
again, I'm not really concerned about that group, but I understand where Stymie is coming from.
Yeah, and the presence, the feel that CJ Carr has. Again, like that's a big. I don't even know if it's an intangible because it's like it's so much a part of his game, and you could see it so easily in the spring game. And the way he moves, even though he's not a runner like Riley Leonard, he moves so well in and out of the pocket that I think that he, that combined with his presence, his quick release, and all those different things, like we're going to see that this spring. I think that that's like that kind of potential if he ends up being the guy. And I really think there's a strong chance that he's going to end up being the guy. Like that can help offset some of that as well. That's a fair point because you do kind of, like when you look at sacks allowed and stuff like that, Riley Leonard absolutely had a big part to do with that, with the escapability that he has. So I asked Vince yesterday, and I'm curious to hear your answer to this. Besides Jeremiah Love, which Notre Dame player excites you the most? What's your answer for each side of the ball?
Defensively, Drake Bowen probably would excite me the most. I think he did tremendous as a first-year starter. I think he's only going to continue to be a dude on the defensive side. And it's just, I think Adon Schuler was probably my honorable mention right after Drake Bowen.
He's my guy on defense. Bowen would be my second guy. Yeah.
But I just think that Bowen has more in terms of responsibility, having to play both run pass, having to be probably the leader of the defense next season, the guy who's calling in the plays, getting everything set up. So I just think there's a bit more on Drake Bowen's plate naturally because he plays linebacker. But again, like he's just, I think he was great this year. I think he's going to really be extraordinary next season.
All right. Get some Carr, some Schuler, Leonard Moore, another good one, CJ Carr. Joe is still going with Jason Onye. And, again, like I think Onye has the skill, but we've kind of been waiting on it for a couple years. And now hopefully he's past this personal issue and he's back and able to play. What's your answer on the offensive side of the ball? You only did defense there.
Yeah. Offensive side of the ball. It would have to be between, I'm thankful Salty's not here, either Jaden Greathouse or CJ Carr.
Those were Vince and I's answers yesterday. I went Greathouse, Vince went Carr.
I think Greathouse has the potential to be that 1,000-yard receiver, 10-touchdown receiver guy that we all think that this offense needs. And he has the most playmaking ability. He has shown the most playmaking ability. And then CJ Carr, to me, is kind of more the question mark, the unpredictable. But if he can get things going, he would really excite me because of, big arm, being able to open up this offense more, allowing Jeremiah Love's game to naturally open up more, Jadarian Price's game to open up more. So in terms of, I just think because CJ Carr actually hasn't played a snap yet, that's why I can't quite go with him. But to me, it's Jaden Greathouse.
Yeah, this receiving group, like Andrew was saying, make or break year for KK Smith. We saw even less of him this year than the year before. Obviously, he was hurt the year before, but we really didn't see any of him. And you've got some other guys like Cam Williams and Micah Gilbert. And, obviously you're adding a transfer in the port, and you've got Greathouse and Faison already. So there's Beefeater says Cam Williams, and I'm just not going to get too worked up about a guy who we haven't seen get to take reps. I think that there's some promise there. There's some hope for him, but I want to see what it looks like when we get to see some reps out of him, hopefully this spring in the very near future. Then I'll decide if that's someone that I needed to get excited about in the long run. So a proposed rule change intended to discourage players from faking injuries that prompt unwarranted timeouts. So it's going to be considered when the NCAA Football Rules Committee meets this month. The American Football Coaches Association has submitted a proposal that would require a player who goes down on the field and receives medical attention to sit out the rest of that possession. A coach would be able to use a timeout to get the player back on the field during that possession. A player injured by a hit that results in a penalty would be exempt from this. So like if you get targeted, like there's targeting on the other guy or a personal foul or whatever, and it forces you to leave the field, then you can still come back on. Also, the one player on offense and the one on defense with a green dot on his helmet indicating he's allowed to receive radio communication from the sideline can re-enter after just one play. So what do you think, Jess? Do you buy or sell all of this potential rule to try to curb faking injuries?
So I buy the idea of it. I don't necessarily I sell kind of the premise of what you just laid out to me. I think it all makes sense outside of they have to sit out the entire possession. I think it should be a 1 or 2 play thing. I don't think you should have to be out the entire possession because I just think you're getting into a gray area of potentially, a guy could feel a sensation on the field and be hurt for a play or two and come off and recover, right? Like,
yeah,
there's all been there. Anyone who's played football, I feel like has been in on the field and be like, dang, that hurt. I need to come off. I don't know what's going on. And then you get kind of checked out. The blood starts flowing a little bit and you're really fine after that. Right. So I am all for, curbing the fake cramps or dehydration or those, because it's obvious sometimes. Right.
Yes.
But I think you get into a gray area of potentially being, well, they got to sit out the whole possession. I don't like that part. I think as long as it's a play or two, probably 2 plays is what I'd feel most comfortable with. That they can get back on the field as long as it's nothing serious. Because again, you're just entering a gray area where now we as fans, spectators, commentators are trying to decide, is the severity of the injury serious enough?
Exactly. Because I guess you can make the argument, well, if he's really hurt, then he should probably sit out the rest of the possession anyway. But like you said, like you could get your bell rung, for example, and have to leave the field. You go to the tent, you get checked on. It's like, okay, he clears concussion protocol, or like you get your ankle rolled, and like you're down on the field and it hurts, and then they come out and check on you and they help you off the field, and then you get off for it's like if it's a 15 play drive, you could probably sit there for 4 or 5 plays. Why should you have to sit out the other 10 or 11 plays at the end? So like I just think it's too much. Joe says, how about the next first down?
That was also maybe that's what I thought of. Maybe
I think that probably makes more sense, like at least until the next first down or something like that. It's just there's just so much gray area trying to decide who really is hurt and who isn't hurt, and why should you're ultimately going to end up punishing someone who has a lot of people who have legit injuries and just needed to get off the field for 3 or 4 plays, but then you shouldn't have to burn a timeout to get them back on the field. So I feel like I sell it. I like the fact that they're talking about it, but I think it's too much, basically, to make them have to sit out for a whole possession. So I've got an interview with Notre Dame baseball player Brady Gumpf coming up after rapid fire. Sean Stifler, of course, is heading into his 3rd season as Notre Dame head baseball coach. They open their season against North Florida this weekend. My question for you, Jesse, what should the expectation for this season be for Notre Dame baseball?
Yeah, I think that this is, year 3 for Stifler. They haven't made the NCAA tournament since, Stifler has been here, ever since Link Jarrett basically left. I think the expectation is you got to get back to the dance this season. You got to get yourself a bid into the tournament. To me, there's no excuse. You're Notre Dame, and you got to look at not only your Notre Dame, but look at the players that Notre Dame traditionally recruits for Notre Dame baseball. Like, you could offer, especially to those kids out on the West Coast, you can offer a great Notre Dame degree and also the potential to play in one of the best conferences in baseball. The ACC is no slouch in terms of baseball, so there's a ton of exposure. I just don't think there's any excuse when your name is Notre Dame that you're not at least contending to be in the tournament every season. I think that anything else is really a failure. I can live with maybe a bubble team that doesn't make it every so often, but I still believe that Notre Dame should be getting themselves into the tournament every season, considering who they are and the profile of players that they can recruit, which is very the profile of players that they recruit is very favorable to Notre Dame. It's just point blank, right? A lot of the kids that they recruit grow up going to private Catholic high schools. They want a good education. They want to play high-level baseball. And so if you put all those things together, I think as Notre Dame, you should be able to make the tournament just about every season. Or again, be right on that fringe every season.
So a couple of different things before I give my answer. Andrew asks, was the cover bare when he took over? It was not bare. They were in the running for an NCAA bid his first season and then kind of tapered off at the end. They did lose some pitchers, a couple, arms to the transfer portal, guys who were on the College World Series team. They lost them, and obviously that turned out to be, harder to replace. And, they had injury as well to a significant pitcher. DK asks, was Bowen in the lineup regularly? No, he was basically not in the lineup much at all. And I think that played into his decision to focus on football rather than, playing both football and baseball. He was primarily just a pinch runner is what he was because of his speed. So he was not in the lineup that much. NCAA tournament is it. It's year 3. You've got to be in the NCAA tournament. Very minimal requirement. You're at least a bubble team for the NCAA tournament. They were 2 games over 500 last year, but they were just 9-21 in the ACC. Get to 500 in the ACC, and you're going to be in tournament contention, assuming you don't lose a bunch of games you're not supposed to lose. Interesting, you'll hear this in this interview with Brady Gumpf. Last year, Notre Dame baseball set the single season program record for home runs hit in a season.
Their pitching was just not there.
Well, not only that, but what Gumpf said was there's going to be a different offensive approach. They're going to kind of go back to, more hit and run, move runners, some bunting and, a little bit more small ball, but try to give the offense more consistency than just live and die by the home run. So there's going to be more of that this year. And that was, kind of goes a little bit more back to Link Jarrett as well. They were doing a lot more of that kind of stuff. And quite honestly, that, it's a long way between not being in the NCAA tournament and being in Omaha, but that kind of game plays well at the College World Series because of the size of the field and all that stuff anyway. So,
you got to imagine.
I think that can go a long way for them, like going back to more of that kind of approach than, all or nothing home runs.
The state of the program from when Link Jarrett took over from Mick Aoki, it was far worse than what
right.
Link or what
Sean
Stifler is taking over. Took over what that from when Link Jarrett left, essentially, right? There was more there, and you got to realize Link Jarrett was, right off the bat, did basically a 180, and by year 3, year 2 they were in the Super Regional Finals, just on the outside of the College World Series. Year 3, now they're in the college, or they went to Omaha. To me, there's no excuse for Stifler to not be at least a bubble team and make the tournament, like we just kind of talked about.
Yeah. Exactly. Especially in year 3. That's where you've got to be now. You've got to be back in that conversation. Andrew asked about the attendance, decent following. It's
cold to start here.
And that's the problem is it's so cold here in March and April. The weather just starts getting nice and then the season's over, basically, so it's tough. There are definitely some diehards who get out there with their blankets and seat warmers and all that different kind of stuff. And, Like that's something I think that they are due for a little bit. Like they've done a lot of nice stuff in terms of the clubhouse and, team facilities and all that kind of stuff. I'd like to see them do a little renovation inside the stadium. Like maybe if you've seen like in the Pacific Northwest, you see a lot more of it where they've got kind of the awning, like over the grandstand. I think you could bring in, like some heaters in there, to try to kind of help spice it up a little bit, get rid of the aluminum seats and go to some seat backs and stuff like that. I think that there's some, some things there, but how much budget they're going to put into it. These were all things that came up when we were talking about whether they should have been hosting and things like that a couple of years ago. That didn't quite work out. You got to get back to being in the tournament though, before you get into those conversations, I think. So, of course, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs lost the Super Bowl. If Mahomes never plays another game, would you consider him the best quarterback ever?
No, I think Tom Brady still has that title for now. I don't think the gap is overly large. I don't think it's, substantially small. But I still think there's a good amount of work to be done. But I'm not ready to dethrone Tom Brady yet.
Yeah, I think that there's an argument for Mahomes is probably more skilled than Tom Brady. But I mean, you're judged by Super Bowls, right? And Tom Brady won 7 of them. So Mahomes, as good as he is, still has a long way to go. Gilmore says definitely top 5. I think that he's in that convert. Like, look at, he's been in 5 Super Bowls and he's won 3 now.
Would you put him ahead of Peyton?
Yes, I would put him ahead of Peyton Manning right now.
So he's number 2 on your list then.
I think
you got Montana ahead of him.
I would put. It's hard because if we're only basing it on Super Bowls, then you got to go Montana, and like Terry Bradshaw would even be in that conversation. Like in terms of overall skill, I don't think that anyone's going to put Terry Bradshaw ahead of Montana. Even though Bradshaw won 4 Super Bowls himself. Joe says Brady has 4 more Super Bowls and is 2-0 versus Mahomes in the playoffs. How is the gap small? Like I said, because of the, like we're saying, if Mahomes never played another game. So if something happened, like you're obviously taking away the back end of his career, and just from a pure skill standpoint, I think that Mahomes is more skilled than Tom Brady, but Brady did it over such a long period of time and won all the Super Bowls. So that makes it a little bit smaller.
And Brady only has 1 Super Bowl head-to-head against Patrick Mahomes, not 2.
Right.
Oh, 2-0 versus in the playoffs. Sorry. I thought he said 2-0 versus him in the Super Bowl. Yeah, I mean, it's just, you got to look at where did Patrick Mahomes get Tom Brady in those games too? Tom Brady at the tail end of his career when he's at his absolute best in terms of football knowledge and IQ, and Patrick Mahomes, who's just now, was just getting started in the league essentially. The thing that differentiates Mahomes compared to Montana, Manning, whoever you want, Mahomes did it right out of the gate, baby. It took Peyton Manning a long time to win a Super Bowl.
Well, that's the thing, is Manning couldn't beat Tom Brady. And, Tom Brady there was a pretty considerable gap in his career of like 8 or 9 years, I think, like where they didn't even get to the Super Bowl. And then it was at the back end of his career where he got there again. And Peyton Manning still was only able to win 1 Super Bowl with the Colts in all that time. And obviously, won another one finally with the Broncos as well. So, because Ant VR says Peyton literally torched the entire NFL for over a decade with arm strength that was average at best. And that's because he was just so good pre-snap and like knowing where absolutely everybody was supposed to be. And he also had a couple of really, some really good weapons,
Hall of Fame
to throw to between Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison.
Can't forget about the tight end either.
And that's the thing that I think that, the same case can be made for Tom Brady, because with the exception of Gronk and Randy Moss, like it's not like he had a lot of elite guys that he was throwing to, especially early in his career. Like he got Gronk later in his career and he became a different kind of weapon. And like even when he had Moss, obviously they ran through the regular season, but then they lose in the Super Bowl. And you can talk about Julian Edelman, but that was more a case of between having Gronk and Brady. I mean, that basically made Edelman, so like Brady never had a lot of really elite guys around him either. And with the exception, like look at this year and the fact, and even I think you could include last year as well, winning a Super Bowl for Mahomes. Like they won 2 Super Bowls after they traded Tyreek Hill. Like other than Travis Kelce, what else has Patrick Mahomes really had around him?
Well,
So
and that's
like,
what that was the difference maker.
The level of success and the lack of overall real elite type guys, like Mahomes hasn't had a whole lot around him out there, and my point is a guy like Peyton Manning had a ton more around him than either Brady or Mahomes had around him.
And, I thought that was the main difference maker for the Chiefs. They just missed firepower on offense, right? Like old Travis Kelce, an offensive line that obviously struggled. Like, who's your next best weapon after that? Old DeAndre Hopkins, rookie Xavier Worthy. Like, the guy didn't have really a lot to work with. And on top of that, he didn't even have a run game that he could go to any fashion. So he can't run the ball, can't pass, and everyone knows you're passing the ball, and you've got no one to pass to outside of, again, aging Travis Kelce. And I'm not up here getting on a podium and finding excuses for Patrick Mahomes. I just think that this offseason, that's what they got to figure out is they need an offensive weapon. Travis Kelce's days are numbered.
Yeah, he's on the backside. Like Travis Kelce has got to figure out, like he hasn't decided for sure if he's coming back, but if he is, he's got to have a little bit different preparation period this summer than what he had last year.
Agreed.
A lot different. Yeah. So which is more likely to happen while Mahomes is still playing? The Chiefs get to 5 more Super Bowls or they never get to another Super Bowl?
Oh, I have to take that they're going to get back to Super Bowls. I think Patrick Mahomes has at least 10 more years in the arsenal, if not more. And they'll definitely be back to another Super Bowl at some point. I don't think they're going to make it next
likely
season.
To get to 5 more. And the reason I say 5 is because they've been to 5 and Brady obviously got to 10.
I think it's more likely a 5 than not going. None. Yeah, that's ultimately what I'm getting at.
I completely agree. I think that they like where Mahomes is in his career and as young as he is and still having Andy Reid and somebody brought up defense.
Wood, none of the injuries.
Yeah, I mean somebody brought up defense and obviously that's a big part of it as well. I think that the Chiefs defense is generally underrated in all this because of again, when you look at the lack of skill talent that Mahomes has, their defense has actually been really good. And they played well enough for at least a half against the Eagles the other night. It's just that Mahomes and the offense obviously couldn't keep up. And when that happens, the dam just opens. But yeah, to answer the question, Mahomes has got multiple Super Bowls in him. And, he and Andy Reid does as well. So I think that it's more likely that they get back to the Super Bowl than to go to none at the close of his career. Because he's now, I think he's pretty much officially, because he's been in the league for 8 years now. At this point, he's heading into the second half of his career now. Whatever that happens to end up being ultimately. Fill in the blank. It's blank that the New York Jets are moving on from Aaron Rodgers.
Logical. New coaching staff. Aaron Rodgers' ego and head has never been bigger. He's coming off a serious Achilles injury, this last season and, recovered faster than anyone ever from an Achilles injury. It just makes sense when you're a coach trying to, establish yourself and change a franchise. Why would you want Aaron Rodgers? He's old. He thinks he knows everything. He thinks he's, probably the offensive coordinator out there. It's just not worth it in terms of developing a program, changing a culture, I think the last thing you need is an old, grouchy Aaron Rodgers on your team.
Supposedly, there's a lot of guys in that Jets locker room who really, like Rodgers, and like they believe in Rodgers. But it just like where you are as an organization, you're bringing in a first-time head coach. That organization needs a reset. You need to figure out you're either going to have to sign a quarterback in free agency or draft a quarterback. They've got to get it right, and it just feels like Aaron. It makes sense for the New York Jets that Aaron Rodgers is not part of their future. It would be kind of hilarious if Pete Carroll were to decide to bring him back out there with the Raiders now that Davante Adams is with the Jets, because that's the other part of it as well. Like, if you're the Jets, do you trade Davante Adams? It feels like you could get at least, a decent draft pick, like a third or fourth round pick, maybe even out of Davante Adams. It just doesn't make sense for him to be there if Aaron Rodgers is there, because the whole reason he went there was to pair up with Rodgers again. So I'm not surprised that Aaron Glenn and the Jets are moving on. And it really feels like to me, like Aaron Rodgers has probably played his last football. It's just time to ride off into the sunset at this point.
I agree 100%. I don't, if you're a young coach, I don't think you want to, basically ride or die with Aaron Rodgers, because exactly. Aaron Rodgers isn't going to ride or die for you. He's accomplished. He's got Super Bowls. He's got MVPs. So at the end of the day, I'm Aaron Rodgers. It's not my fault.
Yep.
So I just, that's not the guy as a first-time head coach where I'm trying to make an impact. That's not who I'm putting all my eggs in the basket with. Maybe 5 years ago, I would have 5-6 years ago, but right now, there's just no chance.
I agree. Absolutely agree. All right, Jess, good stuff as always. I will see you in a couple of days in Pittsburgh
for the women's basketball game. I'll see you there.
That's right. Sounds good. Jesse checking out. And with that, got an interview right now with Notre Dame baseball captain Brady Gumpf. We are joined by Notre Dame baseball captain Brady Gumpf. He and the Irish are heading down to Jacksonville, Florida this weekend to get the season started. You wouldn't know it by looking around here. I think baseball season kind of catches people off guard in mid-February. How you doing today, Brady?
I'm great, Shawn. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. And for those maybe who recognize the last name, it's, Notre Dame softball coach Deanna Gumpf and former Notre Dame baseball assistant John Gumpf as well are the parents of Brady Gumpf, and he is now in his fifth and final season at Notre Dame, and a captain. I'm curious. I mean, you grew up around Notre Dame, obviously, with your parents, having the connections that they have. What are your first memories of Notre Dame baseball?
Oh, geez, that was a long time ago, but I mean, I remember. Well, my dad started off coaching softball with my mom. I don't remember. I don't have any physical memories of that. I've seen photos and stuff, but I do remember, coming to my dad in the dugout, maybe here and there, just being able to work out in the facilities, hitting off the tee when I'm 5 years old. But past that, I've been here my whole life, and we live super close. So I would just walk. It's like a good 20-minute walk. I bring a bat and a glove, walk from my house to the baseball games, watch those for as long as I could. So
I mean, that's all you needed at that point, right? When you're 5 years old. That's kind of what I remember is you and your dad would get inside the indoor facility and, like you said, hitting off the tee and all that kind of stuff, when you were still just a young pup way back when. Yeah. Did you have, as you kind of, got a little bit older, did you have some favorite Notre Dame baseball players back then?
It's easy to say guys like Trey Mancini or AJ Pollock who have been, doing their thing in the big leagues. I will never forget Kevin Biggio with the whole bat waddle. He, it kind of stood out when he was in the box. But yeah, just those guys, they had really good teams back then. Because I think I was probably middle school at that age, maybe getting into high school. So that was my peak of, becoming a Notre Dame baseball fan. So those are some of the guys I'll never forget.
I had a feeling that Trey Mancini might, kind of show up there on the list, obviously, especially as prominent as as he's become. When you were so close to it, was going anywhere else besides Notre Dame, was that ever even an option for you?
It was a thought, just because I never knew whether I was good enough to play here or get into the school. Obviously, extremely elite academics as well. So I wanted to keep my options open for as long as I could. But once I got the opportunity to come here, it was a no-brainer.
I assume by now you're probably done with your undergrad, right?
Yeah.
You've got your bachelor. So what kind of, are you in a master's program, or is it just master's classes? What are you taking right now?
That's right. So I'm in a 1-year specialized master's program. It's actually pretty cool. It's the finance master's, and it's a group of about 43, 44 people, and we're together all day, every day. So it feels like grade school again with the same group. But we have 2 classes Monday, Wednesday, 1 on Tuesday, Thursday, and we're actually in midterm season right now. So
okay. Oh, wow.
Get those out of the way before our first game Friday. But
I mean, that's got to be nice to not have a full load of a full load of classes and that kind of thing as you get into the baseball season now, especially.
Yeah, no doubt. It's definitely nice, especially on Tuesdays when we start those midweeks, just having the 1 class, be able to get right over to this field. It's going to be really nice.
So as a 5th-year guy, and again, a guy who grew up here, as you said, just like a walk from campus and all that, what's it mean for you now to be a senior heading into your last season at Notre Dame?
Yeah, I mean, it's an honor. This is my dream growing up. These are the guys I looked up to when I was 10, 15 years old. And, being that guy, it's inspiring because it helps me realize the impact that I have on younger players as well, whether it's in the area or just people from all over the country, with Notre Dame being such a big brand. It helps me keep perspective of what I'm doing. It's definitely bigger than me. So.
Well, you were a catcher in high school. You're in the outfield now. So what was that? Had you ever played outfield, I guess, before, coming to college?
Yeah, so I caught pretty much every game for my high school team. I had that summer travel team where I predominantly played outfield for them. So I had been doing it. It's funny, when I came in, I still kind of did both my freshman year. Definitely did better in the outfield, so the catching started to kind of fade. There was a stint where I played first base as well, and that was never in a game in the spring, but fall games and practices I worked out at first base. But I'm happy with the outfield transition. That's where I have fun out there. I feel like that's where I contribute the best.
Yeah, I mean, like we were talking right before we started, and it sounds like you guys are able to get outside at least a little bit, because when you're getting ready to start the season, that's always kind of a thing, like if it's snowing too much up here, like there's northern teams trying to get down south, that can be an adventure sometimes with those balls in the air, can't it?
Yeah, no, we're definitely lucky to get outside today. Like I said, the sun's out, the turf's clear of snow. So we'll get out there for some defensive work, maybe some batting practice on the field where we get those live reads. But like you said, like if our first read and outside on the field is going to be in Jacksonville the day before the game, it's not ideal. But
no, I mean that you guys are fortunately able to get work in, obviously in the Loftus and stuff like that, but it's not a full dome stadium. So I imagine that can be kind of an adventure sometimes in itself, just doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, we can get a full infield and full scrimmages in Loftus Center with the full football field in there, but no outfielders. So we're usually just on the other side bunting or base running when we're not being able to hit live off the pitchers.
So you went from a couple of home runs in your first 3 years at Notre Dame to 9 home runs last year. So where did that power come from for you that you got found last year?
I think I'll pat myself on the back here a little bit. It's always been there. It was funny, my freshman year, everybody kind of messed with me, see how far I could hit it in BP. But I think just being able to execute it in the game and allow it to show up in game came with the experience I got the few years beforehand, and just a boost in confidence too. There's a lot of support with our hitting coaches and head coaches and the rest of the teammates as well. So putting me in a position to show it off kind of helped a lot.
Well, I mean, I imagine just going through like the, few years of being in a college strength program and all those kind of things kind of helps out along those lines as well.
Oh yeah, exactly. We have an incredible strength staff. I'll shout out Zach Corden. He's our strength coach right now. And he's on us all the time. And he always likes to pull up the home run numbers too. It's like, how does this guy have 8 home runs and you have 5 at the time? Like, you're lifting more than him. What are we doing? So there's a little bit of competition in there too, and it helps a lot.
Beyond just the power, how do you think maybe you're most different as a hitter now compared to when you were coming into college?
Definitely more consistent. There's a lot of swing and miss coming in. I had the power, but the contact was something that I really wanted to work on developing, and that consistency. So, taking those balls in the dirt, those sliders in the dirt, they look like good pitches sometimes, even though they're not. But training myself to lay off those and, building that approach and helping that.
Well, I mentioned your parents, and your dad played professional baseball, and your mom obviously, played softball in college and a longtime softball coach and everything. So what was it like having 2 parents who were, just so involved in the game overall?
It was super helpful just because, we could talk about the sport, the game whenever we really wanted to. Sometimes we like to separate on the field stuff with the home stuff, especially in high school when my dad was my head coach.
Exactly.
So we would save the baseball talk, keep it away from the dinner table. But if something does come up, and it's nice being in college too, after every game, I could just give them a call, talk about some things, whether it's just, they know how it feels after a tough loss or a great win. So, being able to back me up on that as well.
Well, and your mom, she obviously just retired from softball. So I imagine her retiring is going to kind of give her a new opportunity to really probably, I know she tried to get out there as much as she could, but it's kind of going to be new for her to potentially be at every home game, I would imagine, this season.
Yeah, and she's actually getting on a flight Thursday with my dad to head down to Florida to watch it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think before this year, besides maybe catching the last few innings of the game just from walking over from softball, I don't think she ever saw one full game yet in my college career, not on TV. So, she's coming to Jacksonville. She'll be at, I think, our 3rd series at Belmont, and then all the home games she'll be at. So it's really exciting.
What's retirement been like for her so far? I know you're not at home quite as much. She's, they're both probably even a little bit younger than me. So it's like hard to imagine both of them being, completely out of coaching right now. Is she got the itch at all to get back, to just to be around the field, do you think?
I think not quite yet. I think she might still be in that honeymoon phase away from it.
Right.
She does have a new job working with development at Notre Dame now, away from athletics, but with the university still, and she's crushing it with that. And that's keeping her busy, but definitely excited with the weekends off. She's visited my younger sister's a freshman at Kentucky. So she's been able to visit her a few times as well. Definitely changing the lifestyle.
So you mentioned you played for your dad in high school, and that was here when he was coaching. He was the head coach for a long time at South Bend St. Joseph High School, and you guys won a state championship together. What was that experience like? Not just winning a state championship, but doing it with your dad as the head coach.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was my freshman year at St. Joe. And I was doing a lot of bullpen catching then, but it allowed me to be in the dugout more around the coaches and the older players, watching them and learning. But that was an incredible experience down at Victory Field at Indianapolis. Unfortunately, my senior year with him was the COVID year, so our entire spring got canceled.
Right.
He decided to stop coaching after that year as well. So it was a little bit bittersweet. We were able to end it together, not in a way that we would have liked, but yeah.
Well, and that obviously was rough for a lot of people in a lot of different ways, but to be a senior and, because like when things got canceled, you're literally kind of right on the verge of, I think, the season starting right before they shut it down. So, that had to be rough for everybody to be that close in your last year and then, find out that there was going to be no season.
Yeah, I remember, I think the day we found out that the season was no longer going to happen was the day that tryouts were supposed to take place. So it was right around the corner. I was fortunate enough to have college baseball to look forward to as well. A lot of guys weren't as lucky, but yeah, definitely a tough time for a lot of people.
So I think if my timeline is right, you committed when Mickey Aoki was the head coach, right?
That's right. That was my sophomore year of high school.
Okay.
2018, 2019 season. So yeah.
Okay. So you commit when Aoki is the head coach, but then I think he was gone by the time you actually started playing. So you played a couple of years for Link Jarrett. And then, of course, you played the last couple years for Sean Stifler after Link Jarrett went back to his alma mater at Florida State. So what's that kind of been like, committing with one and then playing for two other guys? What's that been like over the course of your career?
Yeah, so it was interesting. Committing under Mick, I was more my main source of contact at that point was Chuck Restano, though, who was coach under Mick, ended up staying with Coach Jarrett. So I was lucky enough to have that relationship continue on when I came in. And then, I mean, Coach Jarrett was great when he came in. I met him on my official visit my senior year. So I had a little bit of a relationship with him coming in, played with him for 2 years. And then he leaves to Florida State, and then Coach Stifler and his staff came in. And I mean, there's so much great things to say about Coach Stifler, Coach Munger, and then Coach Jones, who's here this year.
Sure.
And Coach Volts. I'm not around Coach Volts as much because he's with the pitchers, but I mean, I love going to the field every day, seeing those guys, and they're incredible.
What was it like? You guys obviously played against Florida State. You went down there. What was that kind of like playing against him for the first time when you went down there?
We played him in South Bend actually that second year. His first year gone, we played him in South Bend, and
that's right. That's right.
Yeah,
forgot it's already been 2 years, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So this last year was Coach Jarrett's second year there, Coach Stifler's second year here as well. But I mean, it was weird that first year in South Bend. Just the guys because the whole staff left. So seeing that group that you're used to having on your side, just in a different color.
Like you said, Restano was he was down there that first year too. Yeah. So
yeah, exactly. So seeing him in a different color was definitely interesting. We took the series from him that year here, which was definitely great. They got us last year, but we're used to it now. Last year at Florida State wasn't as different, but definitely that first year, just the different colors, because they still ran a lot of things that we were used to my first 2 years. So it's kind of funny seeing the way that Coach Jarrett would relay signs from the dugout like that. So that was familiar, but
were you guys hard at work, like seeing if you could steal the signs and all that kind of stuff?
It's on the cards, so we couldn't steal it directly from the cards, but I was like, 0-1-2's on. So that was kind of funny.
Like with Jarrett, he talked a lot about at having an offensive system. And I don't think you hear a lot of baseball coaches talk about it that way. Like if you hear a system, you're thinking more, like football or basketball even, or something. Like what was so different sort of about the way, his system, the way he did things, maybe compared to, I don't know if you just say conventional baseball coaches, or like what was so different about his system?
I think the biggest thing was just more of like the dynamics of the offense. Like there's a lot of base running, base stealing, bunts, hit and runs, kind of using every aspect of the offense into the game and applying it. I think that was a big part of it. And that's something that we actually, because we broke the home run record last year.
Right.
Game. And this year it's kind of been a switch back to, the hit and runs, the safety squeezes, the bunts,
a little more manufacturing and that kind of thing.
Exactly. More scoring without hitting the home runs, because we hit a lot of home runs last year, but didn't have the best record. So there's not always a direct correlation there. So kind of getting past the long ball and more into find other ways to score runs.
A little more consistency kind of thing, maybe something. Okay, I got you.
Especially at a place like when we're playing the majority of games here at Frank Eck in South Bend, the wind's blowing in.
Oh, yeah.
Blowing out. So when it's blowing out, it's great. But a lot of the times it's blowing straight in.
That's right. That's right. Are you a Cubs fan by any chance?
I don't cheer against them, so I wouldn't say but I watch them.
I was going to say, I mean, like Eck plays a lot like Wrigley, just in terms of the wind, how the wind affects things. Or it's amazing how dramatic, that wind can have an effect on that, the way the ball carries on what looks like sometimes should just be sometimes it looks like it's going to be a routine fly and it's out of the park. Other times it looks like it should be out of the park and it's completely knocked down.
Yep. Yeah. So you never know. So with that added aspect of the game, it's good to have this more dynamic offense.
So you are one of a few guys who were, around for that College World Series trip. And again, amazing that it's been almost 3 years now at this point. What was that experience like?
That was incredible too. That was my sophomore year. So we have the returning fifth years. I think there's like 4 of us or 5 of us from that team that are grad students this year, and then the senior class. But like that environment of going to Tennessee for the Super Regional and beating them in a 3-game series, that's something I'll never forget, because that's the team that I think they were like 40-something-4, considered like best college baseball team ever. So going down there, beating them, and then Omaha. I mean, if anybody's ever been to Omaha around the College World Series, there's nothing like it. 100,000 people walking around. I didn't even play much that year, and it's funny because everybody still wanted my autograph. There's like hundreds of little kids, and I was like, "Are you sure you don't want the shortstops?" But it was incredible, the whole fan fest, because we got to walk around and watch some of the other games as well. But it's incredible.
That and like when you think about what you guys did, and as good as Tennessee, like you said, has been the last couple of years, and it had to be fun to hear a fairly silent stadium down there because I know that I've never actually been there for a baseball game myself, but the way everybody talks about it, they are very vocal, very rowdy, the whole thing.
Yeah, definitely rowdy. And then the Rocky Top chant every home run they hit, because we beat them, but they still hit a decent amount, and I can't listen to that song anymore. But it was really cool. And I know they're expanding there too, so it's going to get even rowdier.
Yeah. So what is something about this year's team that we need to know as you guys get ready to start this season?
This team, it's going to be younger. I think we'll have 2-3 freshmen in the starting lineup, and a lot of freshmen contributing on the mound as well. But this team brings a lot of energy. We're really confident. I think we're going to be really fun to watch because of all those different pieces. We have a really tight-knit group too. I know that we're motivated by each other. We have a little bit of a chip on our shoulder because of the way that we're projected. We don't always like to talk about and look at what's on the social media, but we're not blind to it. We see it, and we're not favored by any means. So with the energy that we bring from each other, the trust and motivation we have from each other, plus that extra little chip on our shoulder, I think we're going to be really fun to watch this year.
So what would it mean to you then to be able to finish your career in the NCAA tournament at the end of this season?
It would mean everything, do whatever we can to win these games this year, get as far as we can, and then just let the season play out. But I'm just excited to run it back with our guys this one more year. And I think we're going to have a lot of success this year. Just find those little ways to win.
All right. Awesome. Notre Dame baseball captain Brady Gumpf, he and the Irish start the season this weekend with a 3-game series in Jacksonville, Florida against North Florida. And it'll be less than a month, and the home opener is, I think, the first week of March as well. So a chance to get out there. Hopefully it warms up at least a little bit by the time that
Just a little bit. As long as the sun's out, like I said, we'll be ready.
That's right. That's right. All right, Brady, appreciate it. Good luck this season.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That is Notre Dame baseball captain Brady Gumpf as we wind down tonight on IB Nation Sports Talk. Be sure to hit that like button before you leave. Appreciate you being here. As always, a lot of people hanging out in the chat throughout that interview. Best of luck to them, and hopefully Notre Dame baseball back on the rise this year. Hopefully they end things in the NCAA tournament once again. We will wrap it up with that, and we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.